Hi, Robert Phoenix, 11th house. When it comes to Hillary Clinton, we're in a very different kind of chart than the chart of Donald Trump and the chart of Ted Cruz. Why? Because we know Donald Trump's time of birth. We also know Ted Cruz's time of birth. However, we're not quite sure of when Hillary Clinton was born. And to that extent, we've done our best, or at least some astrologers have done their best, to either place the time of birth by memory or by rectification, which is a process that is a little more mystical and oblique than we have time to get into at this point. However, the chart that most people do use show Hillary Clinton as a Scorpio rising in degree Scorpio, the final degrees of that sign, Scorpio rising, with Sun, Mercury, and Venus in the 12th house. And this actually fits as far as I'm concerned, because we don't really know who Hillary Clinton is in some ways. I mean, we have a sense as to what she stands for, but really, who is Hillary Clinton and what has she done? Everything she's done has been behind the scenes, behind the curtain of the 12th house, with her Sun, her identity, her Mercury, her ability to communicate, communication style, and all of her relationships. As a chart, it's somewhat similar to Joe Biden's, with the same rising sign and a number of the same planets also in the 12th house. So Lois Rodham, who's considered the grand old dame, God bless her and rest her soul, she's no longer with us. Lois Rodham gave this chart basically a D rating, but there's no other real chart to go on except Lois's, and Lois was pretty good at getting these times. So we're going to work with that Scorpio rising. Now, the other thing that she's got going on, which is fairly interesting, is she has the moon in the same house as Donald Trump, with moon in the 4th house. Now, her moon is in the sign of Pisces, Trump Sagittarius. They are in conflict with one another because they are immutable signs. They square off, and their version of what home and the homeland is like is very different for the two of them. Sagittarius tends to be didactic, it tends to be idealistic, it tends to be involved in a form of ism every now and then. When we think of Sagittarius, we think of things like truth and liberty and authenticity and self-authority. At times it can be a little bit rigid. It's the nature of Sagittarius. Pisces is very different. Pisces, anything goes. That means that the boundaries that are in the home can be very diffuse, and the rules of engagement and all the things that are associated with Pisces in the 4th house are much, much more fluid. So we can see that her values are also very Piscean, whereas Trump's values are very Sagittarian. One is based on ideals, sort of didactic ideals, and in Clinton's chart with Pisces, it appeals, or her ideals appeal or translated into a collective mindset where she tries to get as many people buying into what she believes at as large a level as possible. Of course, you would say, well, that's the nature of being a politician. But with Pisces, it's such a widespread broadcast. And there's also a lot of duality in Pisces. It's one of the better aspected planets in her chart. The one aspect in her chart that is very conflicted with that moon, though, is that square to Uranus, which means that if we want to look at a definition of what the Uranus moon square is, and that doesn't really matter what time it is in her chart, because with the Uranus moon square, we're getting into some very interesting territory. So if you've been following what she's been going through, it was claimed that she had a mail server in her closet at home, and she was running essentially a rogue operation through her mail server through her closet. Well, what is a mail server? A mail server is an aspect of technology, and Uranus is the planet that rules technology. And what are we talking about here? It's squaring the moon, which is in the 4th house, squaring home. So there's a conflict here. And if we wanted to look at this element in her chart to see if there's any merit to what went on with that mail server, it's right here. It's in the chart. You can just see that there's a disruption here, that there's a point of definitely a point of conflict. And when we get into Pisces and we get into Neptune and that whole area, it's very, very difficult at times to be really truthful about the nature of whatever it is a person's going through, because, well, that's just the nature of Pisces. She's got a Venus-Saturn square. She's got a Venus-Mars square in her chart. These are difficult aspects. Again, Venus, the planet of relationships, hidden, occluded, occulted in the 12th house. She's got that same kind of challenge that Trump does. It's an afflicted Venus. For Trump, it's the exact conjunction with Saturn and Venus. And in Hillary's chart, it's the square to Venus, and it's the square to Mars. And in many cases, she harbors a temper that is much, much more extreme than people understand or know. Again, that's the nature of Venus in the 12th house. Now, she's got some issues, just like all the other candidates do. She's got some issues coming up. And the biggest issue for her is Pluto, which is in the sign of Capricorn. And it's down in her second house. And the second house is about physical values, material values. So she's going to be dealing with the plutocracy, who will be demanding of her because, well, of course, she's had a lot of money come in her direction through her super PACs and through Goldman Sachs. Pluto in Capricorn, second house, the piper is going to come a-calling at some point in time, and she'll be beholden to those plutocratic forces down there in the second. This is a chart that is not really it's more a chart that is given towards surface and projection, with Jupiter and Sag, early degrees in the first, Pluto, Mars, Saturn, up in the 9th house. The real Hillary Clinton, the person that we're supposed to know and understand, is really completely tucked away and occluded from our vision. And it's only through diving into the 12th house, and that Mars retrograde that's coming up in Scorpio might shed some light exactly on what she's been up to over the course of the last 2.5 to 3 years, when Saturn was going through that house and giving her a bit of a reckoning. So until next time, I'm Robert Phoenix, and you've been in the 11th house. He is a Leo rising, 29 degrees. It's the anaretic degree, which means that he has his first house mostly dedicated to the sign of Virgo, but he is here, make no mistake about it, to play the role of the king with the ascendant in Leo. Leo is supposed to be on the rising sign